Everything in PKI ultimately depends on one thing: the secrecy and integrity of private keys. If an attacker gets a private key, they don't just steal data, they can become you. They can sign software, impersonate services, or decrypt traffic, and the damage can quietly persist for years. Losing a key is just as serious in a different way. You may permanently lose the ability to decrypt archives, authenticate systems, or operate critical services. And because signatures are time-stamped history, many mistakes with keys are effectively irreversible. You can't go back and unsign what was already signed with a compromised key. That's why we treat the private key lifecycle as a critical security process. How keys are generated, where and how they're stored, how they're backed up, when they're rotated, and how they're ultimately and provably destroyed, often anchored by hardware security modules. In this module, we'll walk through each of those stages and see what good looks like for protecting private keys end-to-end. Strong cryptography always starts with strong keys. Think of it as a simple formula: high-quality randomness, plus a modern algorithm anchored in a trusted environment. Randomness or entropy is what makes each key unpredictable. If your random numbers are weak or guessable, with doesn't matter how advanced the algorithm is, attackers can still work backwards and recover the key. That's why secure systems rely on cryptographic random number generators, often seeded from hardware, not from things like timestamps or user passwords. Next comes the algorithm choice. Today, RSA is still widely used, typically at 2048 or 4096 bits. But elliptic-curve algorithms are increasingly preferred because they deliver the same security with much shorter keys and better performance. Specialized schemes like ED25519 focus on efficient, robust digital signatures. Older designs such as DSA are now considered legacy and should only appear for backward compatibility, never for new systems. Finally, keys need a solid trust anchor. They must be generated, stored, and used in environments you control and can audit, like HSMs or hardened key vaults. Combine true randomness, modern algorithms, and a strong trust anchor, and you get keys that can safely support PKI and zero-trust architectures at scale. Most private keys spend almost their entire lifetime sitting on disk, not flying across the network. That makes at rest the primary attack surface you have to defend. Think in layers. Start by protecting the storage itself with full disk or volume encryption, so a stolen laptop or copied virtual disk doesn't immediately give away your keys. Then restrict who can even read the key file. Use strict file permissions and OS access controls, so only the specific process account that needs the key can touch it. And never store private keys in shared folders or generic config repos. Finally, assume someone will eventually try anyway, and monitor. Log key access attempts, alert on unusual reads, and regularly review who actually has the ability to reach those files. When you combine storage encryption, tight permissions, and active monitoring, you dramatically lower the chance that a single stolen file turns into a full PKI compromise. When you design key management, losing a private key is often worse than having a server go down. If the key is gone, you can't decrypt data, you can't issue or revoke certificates, and in many cases, the only option is to rebuild trust from scratch. To handle that risk, you need two recovery paths. A hot path for fast restore into an HSM or secure server, and a cold path kept offline, ideally air-gapped for true disaster scenarios like ransomware or data center loss. Backups themselves must be protected differently from the primary key. Use separate encryption keys, separate access controls, and ideally separate teams involved in restoring them. Then, don't just assume they work. Run regular recovery fire drills where you actually restore keys and verify systems come back cleanly. Also treat backups as a life cycle, not a one-time task. Define how often they're taken, how long they're kept, when they're rotated, and how they're destroyed. Done right, disaster recovery turns a potential business-ending event into a controlled, reversible incident. Key rotation keeps long-lived keys from becoming long-term liabilities. As soon as a key is created, you should already be planning its replacement. Rotation starts by generating a fresh key pair with strong randomness. You then safely distribute the new public key to all the systems and applications that need to trust it. For a short grace period, both old and new keys may coexist, often with the old key used only to verify or decrypt, not to sign anything new. Once you're confident every critical system has switched, you revoke and securely destroy the old key material. That shrinking window limits the blast radius if a key is ever compromised, and makes it much harder for attackers to run long cryptanalytic campaigns. The practical lesson: if rotation is manual, it will be skipped or done late, and that leads directly to outages and incidents. In any serious PKI or zero-trust environment, key rotation must be automated, tested, and treated as a normal, continuous process, not an emergency reaction. When you retire a key, the goal isn't to hide data. It's to make recovery practically impossible. Simply deleting a file or a key reference usually just removes a pointer. The actual bits can often still be recovered with basic forensics tools. There are three main ways to really get rid of data. First, crypto shredding. If data is encrypted and only accessible through a key, destroying that key instantly makes all encrypted data unreadable, even though the bits remain on disk. This is very common in cloud storage and databases. Second, overwriting. You repeatedly write new random data over the same storage locations, so the original pattern can't be reconstructed. This matters more for traditional hard drives than for modern SSDs, which often rely on built-in secure erase functions. Third, physical destruction. You literally destroy the media, shredding, degaussing, or melting disks and HSM modules. This is used for the highest security scenarios, or for hardware that once held root or CA keys. For regulated environments, don't forget the paper trail. A certificate of destruction, or equivalent evidence, is essential to prove that retired keys and media are actually gone. Choosing where to store private keys is really choosing your risk, cost, and operational model. At the top end, dedicated on-prem HSMs give you very strong security and tight control, which is why they're used for financial systems and the most critical root keys. The trade-off is high cost, specialized skills, and slower agility. Cloud HSMs relax the control a bit, but make scaling and integration with cloud workloads much easier. They're a strong fit when you need high assurance, but also elastic capacity. Hardware tokens focus on protecting individual identities or admins. They're portable and fairly secure, but harder to automate and manage at large scale. Software vaults or secrets managers sit in the middle. Good security, strong auditability, and built for scalable cloud apps. But ultimately still software, so they depend heavily on how well your platform is secured. At the lowest end, encrypted files are cheap and simple, and they're fine for development or non-critical use. But they're easy to mishandle, copy, or back up into the wrong place. The key idea: as you move up in security, you usually pay more in money, complexity, and process. Your job is to match the storage option to the sensitivity of the keys and the business impact if they're compromised. In a well-designed PKI, not all keys are created equal, and they should never be protected in the same way. At the very top are your root or master keys. These are the ultimate source of trust, so they should almost never be online. Think offline storage, safes, or hardware security modules, and extremely rare use. Below that are your issuing or CA signing keys. These sign end entity certificates, so they do need to be usable, but still inside high security vaults or HSMs with tight access control, monitoring, and process around every operation. At the bottom are session or ephemeral keys. These are short-lived, generated as needed, and usually kept only in memory. If one of these is compromised, the blast radius is small and time-limited. Equally important is purpose separation. The key you use for digital signatures should not be reused for encryption. Signing keys create long-term, non-repudiable proof. Encryption keys protect confidentiality and may need key recovery. Mixing those roles makes policy, auditing, and incident response much harder and weakens your overall trust model. When you think about key security, don't just ask, is it encrypted? Ask, what is happening to this key at every moment of its life? Start with memory. Private keys should live only in protected memory regions, never paged out to disk and cleared as soon as they're no longer needed. That limits what an attacker can grab from a compromised host. Then look at transit. Whenever keys or key operations cross a network boundary between services, HSMs, or cloud APIs, use modern, well-configured TLS, and never send raw key material in plain text or over ad hoc protocols. Next is logging. You absolutely want to log who accessed which key and when, but you must never log the key itself or any decryptable form of it. Good logs are about metadata and outcomes, not secrets. Finally, think about response. Assume something will eventually go wrong. You need monitoring tuned to spot unusual key usage, alerts that actually fire, and playbooks to revoke, rotate, and isolate quickly. Operational security of keys is about this full chain. Protect in memory, protect in transit, log safely, and be ready to respond fast. You also have to assume keys will eventually be lost or become inaccessible. People leave the company, laptops die, disks crash, and sometimes legal or compliance teams need to recover data that's still encrypted. The challenge is to plan for recovery without creating a single all-powerful copy of the key. That's where M of none control comes in. Instead of giving one person the full secret, you split it into pieces and distribute those pieces across multiple trusted admins. Any M of those N pieces can be combined to reconstruct the key, but fewer than that gives you nothing. This gives you resilience and governance at the same time. You can still recover from personnel loss or hardware failure, but no single admin can quietly unlock everything on their own. And when legal discovery is required, you can reconstruct access in a controlled, auditable way that matches your policy and compliance obligations. At some point, every PKI operator has to deal with a bad day scenario, a key leak, a compromised server, or suspicious certificate use. Once you detect a problem, the first priority is to stop the bleeding. That means revoking the affected certificate, so relying systems immediately stop trusting it. Revocation tells the ecosystem, this credential is no longer safe to use. Next, you generate a fresh key pair and issue a new certificate. You're restoring a clean cryptographic identity, ideally with tighter controls than before. But fixing certificates is not enough. You then have to redeploy trust, update configs, rotate certificates on all affected systems, and make sure clients see and trust the new chain. In parallel, a thorough investigation and root cause analysis must explain how the breach happened. which keys or CAs were impacted, and what process or design changes are needed so you don't repeat the same failure. As your organization grows, the main challenge in key management is to remove humans and hard-coded secrets from the loop, and let automated systems handle keys safely. Imagine every change in code automatically flowing through a pipeline that talks to a trusted key or certificate service. On each run, the pipeline either generates or fetches keys just in time, uses them for deployment, and then lets them expire or be rotated without manual effort. Modern platforms make this practical. Policy as code defines which apps are allowed to get which keys. Kubernetes controllers can request and renew certificates for pods automatically. Vaults and cloud KMS services hold the actual private keys in hardened environments and expose only tightly scoped, audited access. The result is that developers focus on shipping features, while the platform enforces consistent key security at scale, across thousands of services and deployments. By now, you've seen the full key lifecycle, so let's lock in the habits that actually keep it safe. Keys should never be set and forget. Rotate them regularly based on risk and usage, not just calendar dates. High-value or internet-facing keys deserve shorter lifetimes. Keep your most critical root and issuing keys inside HSMs, so that the private material never exists in plain form on a normal server. Then automate as much of the lifecycle as possible: generation, issuance, renewal, and revocation, so you don't depend on heroics and manual tracking. Also separate keys by purpose. One key for TLS with a different one for code signing, another for token signing. That way a single compromise doesn't give an attacker everything. Equally important are the anti-patterns. Never hard-code keys into source code or configuration templates. They will leak through repos, screenshots, and backups. Avoid legacy or weak algorithms, because a perfectly managed but cryptographically weak key is still insecure. Don't move private keys around over email or chat, just this once. And don't log key material or detailed secrets into monitoring systems. If you follow these core do's and avoid these don'ts, your PKI design has a strong foundation, even before you add more advanced controls. When you think about a strong PKI, treat it like a building resting on a few critical pillars. The first pillar is protection. Keys must be secure from birth to death. That means strong generation, secure storage, controlled use, and deliberate destruction. If any phase is weak, attackers will aim straight at that gap. The second is automation. Manual key and certificate handling almost guarantees human error and outages. Reliable tooling, policy-driven issuance, and automatic rotation keep your environment both safer and more consistent. Third comes compliance. Your controls should stand up to FIPS, GDPR, and your industry's own audits. Good governance around keys is not just nice security hygiene. It's often a regulatory requirement. Finally, resilience. Assume systems will fail. You need tested backups, recovery procedures, and the ability to restore keys and services quickly, without breaking trust chains. All of these work together. In practice, your PKI will only be as secure as the weakest of these pillars. Effective key management comes down to a few brutally simple questions. First, how secure is your key storage really? Not just it's in the cloud, but who can access it, how it's isolated, and how it's monitored. If an attacker ever reaches that storage, your entire PKI can be silently compromised. Second, if a key is lost or corrupted, can you recover without taking critical systems down for hours or days? That means tested backup and restore procedures, not just theoretical plans. Third, is key rotation predictable, automated, and documented? Keys that live forever become a permanent liability. You want short, well-managed lifetimes, so a stolen key has limited value. Keep those three questions in mind, because they set the stage for our next step. Using hardware security modules to harden storage. Enforce policy in hardware, and bring your key management to an auditable standards-based level.